The rain had that soft kind of rhythm, the kind that doesn't ask for attention, just keeps tapping, like memory trying to come back. Margaret stood by the window, not quite looking out, not quite looking in. Her hand brushed the velvet on the back of his favorite chair, still indented, still warm if memory could be trusted, as if he'd just stepped away and might walk through the door any second. But the door stayed closed. The fireplace hadn't been lit in weeks. The tea in her cup had long since gone still, cooled to the quiet kind of cold. Only the mantel clock kept moving, as if time itself was holding its breath. She closed her eyes, and in that hush, he was there again, that crooked smile, that laugh that always arrived half a beat late, just enough to surprise her. But even the memory didn't stay long this time. No sound from the garage, no humming down the hallway, no scent of his aftershave near the door. The world had moved on. The tabloids had found someone else to scandalize. The neighbors stopped pretending to be curious. The whispers, the chuckles, they faded. But she hadn't. Margaret Holloway still checked the mailbox every morning, still paused too long at green lights, still turned at the sound of gravel shifting outside, just in case. Then the knock came. Not from him, from them. The FBI. Polite, apologetic even, but firm. They asked her things that didn't fit inside the home they built. Names she didn't know. Money that wasn't hers. People she couldn't picture. They wanted answers, but all she had was the absence. All she could offer was what was left behind. His jacket, his favorite book on the nightstand, and the toothbrush, still in the holder. Because love, even the truest kind, sometimes leaves without saying goodbye. And no one, not even the ones with badges, could tell her why, or if he'd ever return. Before the headlines, before the flashing cameras and sideways glances, there was just Margaret. Margaret Holloway, widow, worker, wired for survival. She'd built something solid, steel and contracts, trucks on the road, her name on every invoice, 60 years old, mind sharp as ever. Heart, well, she kept that tucked away. People said she was alone, but alone doesn't always mean lonely. Then came the Lincoln, dark blue, clean, a little too shiny for the gravel drive, and out he stepped, young, nervous, hands too big for his sleeves. Jonah Miller. She remembered that name before she remembered his face. He opened the door for her and kept doing it. Day after day, drove her to meetings, waited quietly outside the clinic, spoke only when spoken to, but always kind, always present. The kind of presence that doesn't crowd, just fills the air gently. And then, on a Tuesday in the rain, she slipped. Not much. Just enough to feel foolish. He caught her, both arms, held her steady, and didn't let go right away. That's when it shifted. Not love, not yet. Just something softer, something that sat between silence and recognition. He listened differently. Not like others, who waited for her to finish so they could begin. He heard her, and he saw more than the tailored jacket or the sharp questions in boardrooms. He saw her hands tremble once and never brought it up. Just carried her briefcase the next day without asking. Then the morning came. Early, cold, no power in the guest house, car battery dead. She offered him coffee. He made her laugh. Not the kind you plan, the kind that bubbles up through years of quiet. And that laugh, that single, startled laugh, was the first real sound her heart had made in a very, very long time. She didn't forget it. She never would. They didn't mean to fall in love. It didn't happen all at once. There was no moment, no music swelling, no lightning strike. It crept in, between the ordinary. Morning drives, evening quiet. A glance in the rearview mirror, a second cup of chamomile on the porch. The kind of closeness that builds without asking. The kind you don't notice until it's the only thing keeping you warm. Margaret had always been careful. Edges sharp, boundaries neat. But with Jonah, the edges softened. He brought her tulips once, on her birthday. Didn't know she preferred daisies. She smiled anyway, because it had been years since anyone remembered her birthday at all. He fixed the garden light, brought in her groceries before the storm could. He sat with her when her hip wouldn't let her stand and told her stories about his grandmother's pies in Missouri. He didn't talk about his past much, but when he did, he gave it gently, like something fragile. There were no grand gestures, no midnight kisses, no sweeping hands pulling her close, just less loneliness, bit by bit. And one spring evening, under lilacs she'd meant to prune, she took his hand. No hesitation, just breath, just being. But then came the world. And the world is rarely kind. The license was public. The photos were printed, her hair, silver, his sleeves rolled. They called her desperate, called him worse. The headlines didn't blink. The board sent warnings. Her sisters stopped coming by. Old friends found new places to stand at parties. But Margaret, for once, stood still, unmoved. Because Jonah, that young man they mocked, never once looked at her with anything but grace. He danced with her in the living room to scratchy old records and the flicker of candlelight. She read poetry aloud. He listened like it was scripture, rubbed her hands when the joints ached. One night, in the hush between songs, she asked him, half laughing, why he'd married her. And he said, quiet and sure, because I knew I'd never feel invisible with you. And that was enough, more than enough. It was a Thursday. One of those soft ones, warm air drifting through the screens, curtains breathing in and out like old lungs. Margaret was in the garden, lavender in one hand, clippers in the other, humming something forgotten, and then a knock. Not hurried, not loud, but it didn't belong there. 3 men, badges, voices too calm to be casual. They asked for Jonah, didn't raise their voices, didn't call it what it was, just questions. Small ones at first, then deeper, sharper. Where had he lived before Missouri? Why had he changed his name? Did she know about the accounts, the transfers, the trail? Margaret sat down slowly, hands still fragrant with soil and lavender, gripping the armrest like it might steady her heart. They said a name, not Jonah. One she'd never heard, but apparently belonged to the man she'd shared soup with every Sunday. They showed her numbers, charts, photos, each one feeling less real than the last. And then, just as they turned to leave, one of them said it. We think he might be in danger, ma'am. We believe he was trying to disappear. Disappear. She repeated it to herself like a word from another language. Jonah? The man who folded laundry with both hands like it was a sacred ritual? The one who ironed her napkins and made her laugh in her sleep? But the door had closed behind them, and the room felt too large. She called his phone, straight to voicemail. No ring, no rhythm. She walked to the guest house, shoes forgotten, heart too loud. The bed was made, neat, drawers empty, but some things remained. The toothbrush, still in the holder, still tilted to the left like always. His shoes, still by the door, one slightly scuffed from that trip to the lake, and the mug, the faded Cardinals one. The one he never let her throw away, still on the counter, still holding a ring of coffee at the bottom. But no Jonah, just echoes, and a silence so thick it made the clock in the hallway sound like thunder. 2 days. That's how long the silence stretched before she found it, tucked beneath the dresser drawer. Almost hidden, but not quite, like he hadn't meant to bury it, just leave it quietly behind. Her fingers shook a little. She wasn't the trembling type, not usually, but this felt different. No stamp, no return address, just her name, written in that hand she knew better than she ever admitted. Inside, a single page, handwritten, the way people used to write when they meant every word. But it wasn't a goodbye, wasn't even an explanation. It felt more like a pause, a breath between sentences that would never come. If I could have told you everything, I would have. But some truths don't belong in sunlight, Margaret. Not because they're evil, but because they'd burn too hot. I never lied about how I felt. I just couldn't let what I was hurt who you are. No signature. He didn't need one. She knew the curl of his lowercase f, the tilt of the lines, the way the ink pressed deeper at the end of each word. Her eyes didn't blur. She didn't cry, just folded it back slowly, deliberately, held it against her chest as if her heartbeat might answer it somehow. It didn't fix anything. Not the questions, not the agents, not the names she didn't recognize or the numbers she still didn't understand. But it said one thing, no paper, no file, no flashing headline ever could. He loved her. Whoever he was, whatever he was running from, he had loved her. That evening she sat in his chair, turned on the old record player, let Ella fill the room with velvet and ache. Her fingers moved across the armrest, tracing it like she used to trace the lines of his jaw when they danced in the quiet. The lavender by the window had started to wilt. Outside, the porch light flickered once, then again. She didn't move, didn't reach for hope, didn't chase what wasn't there. She just sat, still, with the one thing he hadn't taken with him, the truth of what they'd shared. Not who he was, but what they were. And that was enough for now. Weeks passed the way clouds drift quietly, without asking permission. Margaret stopped picking up the phone, unless she knew the number. Even then, she'd sometimes just let it ring. She stepped back, from the boardroom, from the company she'd built. Let her niece take over, smart girl, steady hands. Margaret took her tea later now. No rush. She'd linger in the garden, let the breeze do the talking. People whispered, said she'd been fooled, said she was grieving a fantasy, that the boy had played her, Used her. Maybe they were right. But grief doesn't argue, it just settles, in the corners, in the air between mourning and memory. Then one Tuesday afternoon, a package. Manila, plain, no name, no postage, just there, at the gate, inside a USB drive. She held it like a question, small, cold, unexplained. And before she plugged it in, she paused. The way you do before opening a door you're not sure you want to walk through. Then, the screen. Not documents, not ledgers or codes, not the kind of secrets people expect. Just photographs, dozens, him. Younger, a little girl on his hip, his smile a little easier then. Him in uniform. Fatigues dusted with dirt, bandage on his hand, still smiling, and then kneeling, by a grave. That's when her hand went still. And then, the video. Only a few seconds, no music, just wind. He's sitting in her garden, their garden. Phone in hand, hair brushed by breeze, eyes softer than she remembered. If they ever find you before I come back, tell them I wasn't running from her. I was running for her. She didn't blink. Watched it again, and again, and again, until the screen faded to black, and all that remained was the echo of his voice and the wind in the trees just outside her window. By autumn, the noise had quieted. The headlines had moved on, found someone newer, louder, shinier. No vans in the driveway now, no cameras clicking through curtains, no curious eyes in aisle 3 of the grocery store. Just wind and quiet and time. Once in a while, a letter would arrive, from someone claiming they'd seen him, heard from him, knew where he'd gone. She never believed them. Not really. Not really. Margaret walked differently now. Not weaker, just slower. As if every step remembered something she couldn't quite say out loud. She left his coat hanging by the door. Didn't touch it, didn't wash it. It still held his shape. Still smelled faintly of cedar and rain. His mug stayed near the sink. That old Cardinals logo, still chipped on the rim. And the record player, it stayed out. Even when the stylus skipped. Even when the songs crackled more than they played. She started waking before the sun. Not from restlessness, just rhythm, habit. She'd walk the hallway barefoot, her hand brushing the wallpaper like it might steady her through the memories. It was the same hallway he used to wait in. Keys in hand, shirt still half untucked, smile not quite awake but always ready for her. Now it was just her, and the silence. Until one morning, it wasn't. The knock was gentle, barely touched the wood, like a question that didn't want to interrupt. She opened the door without expecting anything. And there she was. A girl, early 20s maybe, dark curls tucked beneath a cap faded by sun and time. She looked tired, too tired for her age. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice small. "Are you Margaret Holloway?" Margaret nodded. Didn't speak. Couldn't. The girl reached inside her coat and pulled out a folded note. "He told me." Her voice broke. "If anything ever happened, I should come here." Margaret's breath caught. Something in her chest stirred. The girl's hands trembled as she passed the paper. Margaret didn't open it. Not right away. She just looked at her. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her mouth, the way her lip curled when she was trying not to cry. There was something there. Something familiar. Something that made her feel less alone and more haunted all at once. She opened the door wider, stepped back. They sat together in the parlor. The silence between them wasn't cold. It was heavy but kind, and when Margaret finally unfolded the note, just one line. "This is my sister. She's the only family I have left. Please, show her the world they tried to take from me." And just like that, the quiet wasn't quite as quiet anymore. Her name was Eva. She said it softly, as if she hadn't spoken it aloud in a while. She spoke slow, with long pauses, the kind that don't come from thought, but from memory. The kind of memory you don't want to hold but can't set down. Over tea and scones, they sat by the window. The light was gentle, the room still. And one by one, the pieces came. Pieces of Jonah Margaret never knew. Not because he lied, but because he wanted to carry them alone. He and Eva, they'd grown up in the in-between. Foster homes, empty holidays, different roofs, same ache. When their parents died, he stepped in, too young, too scared, but willing. He pretended to be older, changed dates on forms, took jobs he wasn't allowed to take, just to keep her fed, keep the lights on, keep the world from splitting them apart. When Eva was 13, they almost did. She was nearly taken. He vanished for 2 days. No one knew where. Then came back with a new name, a new story, and a bus ticket that rewrote their lives. Jonah Miller, that name wasn't his first, but it was the one he chose to protect her. "He never stopped running," Eva said. Her voice almost broke, "but he stopped looking scared when he met you." Margaret didn't speak, just held the edge of her napkin, tight, like it might steady her. Outside, the birch tree rustled in the wind. The same one Jonah used to string lights on every Christmas. Even when it didn't snow, even when they didn't need them. Eva looked down, then looked up again. He said you reminded him of our mother. Not because of your face, but because of how you saw him. Like he wasn't broken, like he could stop running. They didn't speak after that. Not for a long time. The silence wasn't heavy, just needed. Eventually, Margaret stood, walked to the shelf by the fireplace. She pulled down the photo, their wedding day. His tie was crooked, her hair tousled by the wind, but the smiles, real, unpolished, whole. She handed the frame to Eva. No speech, just hands. He would have wanted you to have this. Eva blinked fast, held it like it was made of something more than glass. That night, Margaret made up the guest room, not his, that stayed as it was, untouched, waiting. She chose the one down the hall, the one with the view of the garden, laid fresh sheets, set a book by the lamp, lit it. And for the first time in months, the house didn't feel like a question. It didn't feel like waiting. It felt like something still moving. Not with return, but with continuation. And that was enough. It was a Tuesday. Quiet, soft. The kind of day that didn't ask for anything, except maybe your attention. Margaret returned to the garden with pruning shears in hand. Eva followed, arms full of seed packets Jonah had bought and never planted. The lavender had come back stronger this year. The roses, a little wild, untamed at the edges, but she didn't mind. She brushed a leaf from her sleeve, smiled. Jonah always said this garden felt more alive than any boardroom. Her voice, gentle, worn like an old quilt. Eva knelt beside her, fingers in the soil, like she belonged there. He talked about it all the time, said it's where you smiled with your whole face. Margaret chuckled, a sound from somewhere deeper than her throat. Dry, warm. He was always exaggerating. Eva looked up, eyes steady. No, he wasn't. They worked in rhythm, no rush, no need to speak. Cosmos, foxglove, tulips, even though Margaret never liked them. But Jonah did, so she made space. As the sun dipped lower, she brought out 2 wrought iron chairs, placed them just where he liked them. She poured 2 cups of tea, one for herself, one for memory. The light stretched across the lawn, long and gold, touching the path he used to walk. He always paused there, knocked the mud off his boots, every time. Eva sat beside her, held the old Cardinal's mug, the one he left behind. She wrapped her hands around it like it still carried heat. He saved me, Eva said. Margaret didn't look at her. I know, she replied. He saved me too. They didn't need more than that. The silence between them, no longer sharp, just soft, like a blanket shared between 2 people who knew the same ache. Birdsong returned to the trees. A breeze stirred the wind chime Jonah had insisted sounded like church bells. It came from a dollar store. But he meant it. Margaret closed her eyes, let the sound drift through her. She didn't know where he was, didn't know if he'd ever return. But in that moment, with hands in soil and memory in the air, she didn't need all the answers. She just needed the echoes. Winter came slow that year. Didn't rush in, just lingered at the edges. The first frost traced lace on the windows by mid-November. Margaret rose before the sun. Not out of restlessness, but rhythm, ritual. She lit the fire he once knelt to build. Same spot, same crackle, same care. The coffee was strong, just strong enough to taste him in the cup. And then, she wrote. Not for the world, not for some memoir or column or legacy, just for him. Only him. 10 pages, then 20, then more. The pen moved like breath, slow, certain, unfinished. Some pages held memory, his laugh at squirrels stealing birdseed, the way he danced badly to Sinatra, the soft sound of his voice reading to her when her eyes gave out. Other pages held questions, quiet ones she'd never had the courage to say aloud. Did you know how much I loved you? Did you leave to protect me, or because you didn't think I could bear the truth? Did you think I'd wait? And then, near the end, a shift, a steadiness. I didn't wait, Jonah, I lived. I miss you every day, but I lived. She folded the last page with care, slipped it into an envelope without sealing it, then stepped outside, into the cold, bare fingers gripping the letter like a prayer. She walked to the oak, the one they'd planted the year they said yes, without quite knowing what it meant. No plaque, no cross, no name. Just earth, roots, and the hush of wind. She pressed the envelope beneath the soil, gently, as if laying down a memory that could finally rest. Eva watched from the porch. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. By now, she was part of the house. Part of the floorboards that creaked in the same places. Part of the hum in the radiator at dusk. They never spoke of the FBI again, or the USB, or the questions that had no proper place in a home rebuilt from silence. Instead, They planted bulbs, made slow dinners, sat in the garden even when it was too cold to stay long. They rebuilt, thread by thread, a life without answers, but full of peace. And one evening, Margaret stood by the hallway mirror, tucked back a strand of silver hair. And for the first time, she didn't turn to look behind her. She looked ahead and saw herself. And that is where her story rests. Not in scandal, not in whispers, not in the corners of a headline that faded before the ink dried, but in love. A quiet kind, the kind that doesn't shout but stays. A love that outran shame, outlived gossip, softened two forgotten hearts that had nearly given up on being seen. They laughed at her for loving someone half her age, but they never saw the half of him that carried twice the weight, or the half of her that still dreamed like a girl sitting barefoot on porch steps waiting for the moon. In the end, the file closed. No charges, no trace, just a line, tucked near the bottom. Person of interest, presumed safe. Safe. Maybe that's all she ever prayed for. Not answers, not apologies, just safe. And now, as the garden grows wild again and the porch light flickers on by habit, her story settles into something more quiet than an ending, something soft enough to begin again. Do you remember how many times her full name was spoken? If you do, you've been listening closer than most. Drop your answer in the comments. We may feature your name in a shout-out as a thank you for being part of our Fiction Echoes family. And if you've ever loved someone who vanished, what would you say if they ever came back? We'll be here, telling stories, waiting, listening, just like she did.